I caught them in our bed, the sheets still rumpled from where I'd slept the night before after driving back from my mother's hospital. 3 years of building a life together shattered in an instant as my boyfriend and my cousin scrambled for clothes, for words, for excuses. When the shock finally settled into silence, he looked me straight in the eyes, his voice eerily calm as he said, "You were never there for me." I stood frozen in the doorway, my mind struggling to process the scene before me. My body felt disconnected, like I was watching someone else's life implode. The conference badge still hung around my neck, Dr. Julia Mitchell, pediatric resident, a reminder that I'd cut my medical conference short by a day to surprise Ryan. Some surprise, the afternoon sun streamed through the half-closed blinds, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air. Megan, my cousin, had managed to pull on Ryan's t-shirt, the one I'd given him for his birthday last month, while clutching the rest of her clothes to her chest. Her face was flushed, eyes darting between Ryan and me like a cornered animal. "Jules, she started, her voice breaking. I held up my hand, stopping whatever explanation or excuse she was about to offer. The betrayal from Megan cut almost deeper than Ryan's. We'd grown up together, shared clothes and secrets, been each other's bridesmaids at future weddings since we were 12. "How long?" I managed to ask, my voice surprisingly steady. Ryan ran his hand through his disheveled hair, a gesture once so endearing to me. "Does it matter?" "6 months," Megan whispered, not meeting my eyes. "Since your birthday party." "My birthday party?" The one I'd left early because of an emergency with a patient. The one Ryan had insisted on continuing without me, saying I shouldn't ruin everyone else's good time just because duty called. I remembered calling him around midnight, bone-tired after saving a child's life, listening to the party sounds in the background as he told me how much he missed me. 6 months, I repeated, the timeline unwinding in my head. Half a year of lies. Of looking me in the eyes and saying, "I love you," while sleeping with my cousin. "You're barely home, Julia," Ryan said, his initial shock morphing into defensiveness. "I'm here alone most nights. Do you know what that's like? To always be someone's second priority." The unfairness of his accusation hit me like a physical blow. I'd supported Ryan through everything, his 3 career changes, the depression when his startup failed, the months of unemployment when I'd covered all our expenses without complaint. I'd arranged my brutal residence schedule to attend every family dinner with his parents, sat through countless gaming sessions with his friends, proofread his resume and cover letters at 3 in the morning after 20-hour shifts. "I'm a doctor," I said, my voice low and precise. "You knew that when we met. When we moved in together. When we talked about our future. Knowing it and living it are different things," he shot back. "Megan actually listens to me. Actually has time for me." Megan flinched at being dragged into his justification. I noticed she'd inched toward the door, clearly eager to escape. "Don't leave on my account," I said, my tone arctic as I stepped aside. "This is clearly your space now." As Megan hurried past me, I caught a whiff of her perfume, the one I'd given her for Christmas, mixed with the scent of Ryan's cologne. I wondered how many times she'd been in our apartment, in our bed, while I worked overnight shifts to save children's lives. How many family gatherings they'd exchanged glances at while I remained oblivious. "We need to talk about this," Ryan said once she was gone, pulling on his jeans. The audacity of him thinking we had anything left to discuss made a bubble of hysterical laughter rise in my throat. "No, we don't." I turned and walked through the apartment that hours ago I had considered home. Photos of us lined the walls, hiking trips, his graduate school graduation where I'd cheered despite coming straight from a 30-hour shift, holidays with both our families. Memories now tainted beyond recognition. I in the kitchen, I grabbed my car keys from the counter. My mind was spinning, trying to calculate next steps with the clinical detachment I used for medical emergencies. Hotel. Clothes. Toothbrush. Canceled joint credit card. Call work. "Julia, wait." Ryan followed me, still shirtless, his face a mixture of guilt and irritation, as if I was the one being unreasonable. "You can't just walk out. Where are you going to go?" "That's no longer your concern." I opened a drawer and removed my passport and birth certificate, essential documents I suddenly realized I didn't trust him with. "This is what I'm talking about," he said, gesturing at my efficiency. "You're so cold sometimes." So clinical. I paused, one hand on the door, and really looked at him, this man I'd loved for 4 years, whose dreams I'd supported, whose body I knew as well as my own. In his eyes I saw not remorse, but resentment. Somehow, in his narrative, I had become the villain. "You were never there for me," he repeated, softer this time, as if trying to convince himself. The words hung in the air between us, a stunning revision of our shared history. In that moment, I realized Ryan had been rewriting our story for months, casting me as the neglectful girlfriend to justify his betrayal. "I was always there for you," I said quietly. "You just didn't value what I gave because it wasn't what you wanted." I walked out, closing the door on the life we'd built. In my car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, waiting for the tears that didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange, calm clarity cutting through the shock, a surgeon's focus in the middle of unexpected complications. Ryan had just shown me exactly who he was. Now I had to decide who I was going to be in response. My phone buzzed with a text. "Megan, we need to talk." It wasn't what it looked like. I stared at the message, then at the string of previous texts from her. Checking on me, asking about my shifts, offering to bring dinner to Ryan on nights I worked late. "You're working so hard, Jules," she'd written just last week. "Don't worry about Ryan. I'll make sure he's not too lonely." I switched off my phone and started the car. The betrayal wasn't just the affair, it was the calculated deception, the performance of caring while systematically undermining my relationship, the exploitation of my demanding career. As I drove toward the nearest hotel, another text came through, this time from Ryan. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I still love you, but we need to talk about how things haven't been working for a while." Even now, he was spinning a narrative where our relationship had been broken, where his betrayal was merely a symptom rather than the disease itself. Even now, he couldn't take responsibility. I pulled into the hotel parking lot and rested my forehead against the steering wheel, finally allowing the tears to come. Not for the relationship that had died the moment I opened the bedroom door, but for my own blindness. For the wasted years. For the cousin I'd trusted and the man I'd believed in. Tomorrow I would start sorting through the wreckage. Tonight, I just needed to remember how to breathe. The hotel room was sterile and impersonal, which suited my mood perfectly. I sat cross-legged on the bed, my phone buzzing every few minutes with texts and calls I continued to ignore. Outside, rain had started to fall, streaking the window with rivulets that mirrored the tears I'd finally allowed myself. 4 years. For years of loving Ryan, of building a life around our shared future. I'd structured my residency schedule around his preference for having weekend mornings together. I'd chosen this city for my medical training specifically because his career opportunities were better here than where I'd received my top program offer. My phone buzzed again. My mother this time, not Ryan or Megan. I answered, my voice rough from crying. "Julia? Are you all right? Ryan called looking for you. He sounds upset." Of course, he'd called my mother. Ryan had always been good at managing perceptions, at being the charming, attentive boyfriend in public. My mother adored him. Everyone did. "I caught him with Megan," I said flatly. "In our bed." The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds before my mother's shocked intake of breath. "Our Megan? Your cousin?" "Yes." "Oh, sweetheart. I'm so sorry." Her voice softened with genuine concern. "Where are you? Do you need me to come?" I closed my eyes, grateful for her unconditional support. "I'm at the Marriott downtown. I just need some time to think." "I understand. Just remember you don't have to go through this alone." After hanging up, I opened my laptop and did what I'd been avoiding for the past few hours. I checked social media. I wasn't particularly active, my brutal residency schedule leaving little time for posting updates. But Ryan was, and so was Megan. I scrolled back through 6 months of posts, seeing them with new eyes. Photos of a dinner party at our apartment, one I'd missed due to an emergency surgery. Megan was there, seated next to Ryan, their shoulders touching. A group outing to a concert on a night I was on call. Megan and Ryan on the edges of the group, slightly apart. I kept scrolling, the evidence mounting. Check-ins at restaurants I'd never visited. Comments with inside jokes I wasn't part of. Their affair hadn't just been conducted behind my back, it had been flaunted in plain sight, hidden only by my trust and my absence. A text from my friend Sarah popped up. Just heard from Caitlin. Are you okay? Call me. Caitlin was part of our extended friend group. How had she heard already? I called Sarah immediately. How many people knew? I asked without preamble when she answered. Sarah's hesitation told me everything. Jules, it's not that simple, how many? She sighed. A few people had suspicions. They were spending a lot of time together when you were working. But no one knew for sure. Or if they did, they didn't tell me. The betrayal expanded beyond Ryan and Megan, tentacles reaching into our social circle. How many uncomfortable dinners had there been where everyone at the table knew except me? How many pitying glances had been exchanged behind my back? Why didn't anyone say anything? I asked, though I already knew the answer. It's complicated, Sarah said. Ryan always explained it as him being lonely, needing company. Megan being a good friend. And you know how focused you've been on your residency. The implication hung unspoken between us. Somehow, my dedication to saving children's lives had become the justification for my boyfriend's infidelity. Even Sarah, my friend, was partly blaming me. I need to go, I said abruptly, ending the call before she could respond. I returned to my grim social media archaeology, finding more breadcrumbs with each search. Photos of them at my family's annual summer barbecue, an event I'd left early to cover a colleague's shift. Ryan with his arm casually draped over Megan's chair. Megan wearing a bracelet I didn't recognize, a gift from him, perhaps. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. A check-in from 2 months ago at the French restaurant where Ryan and I had had our first date. Making new memories, Megan had captioned it with a heart emoji. Ryan had commented, better than the original. The deliberate cruelty of it took my breath away. They hadn't just betrayed me, they had been actively rewriting my relationship history, replacing my memories with their own versions. My phone rang again. Megan this time. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. Jules, please let me explain, she began, her voice wobbling with what sounded like rehearsed remorse. Explain what? How you've been sleeping with my boyfriend for 6 months. Or how you've been looking me in the eye at family dinners while doing it. It just happened, she protested. We didn't plan it. At your birthday party, you left early again, and Ryan was so upset. Don't you dare. I cut her off, my voice deadly quiet. Don't you dare blame me for this. I'm not blaming you, she backpedaled quickly. But you have to admit, Jules, you're never around. Ryan was lonely. He needed someone who could be there for him. Who could put him first sometimes. The same narrative Ryan had offered, now echoed by my cousin. They had clearly aligned their stories, crafted a version of events where I was the neglectful girlfriend, and they were just two lonely souls finding comfort in each other. You're my family, I said, my voice breaking despite my attempt at control. I trusted you. And I feel terrible about that, Megan said, sounding anything but. But feelings are complicated. You of all people should understand that. Your career has always come first for you. There it was again. My dedication to medicine being weaponized against me. As if saving lives was a selfish choice rather than a vocation that demanded sacrifice. My career didn't make Ryan cheat, I said flatly. His choices did. And yours. After hanging up, I sat in the gathering darkness, letting the full weight of the betrayal settle over me. It wasn't just the affair, it was the calculated nature of it. The way they had exploited my absences, the way they had constructed a narrative that absolved them of responsibility, the way they had turned my commitment to medicine into a character flaw. My phone lit up with a text from my aunt, Megan's mother. Julia, we need to talk about what's happening. I'm sure there's a way to work through this as a family. The message sent a spike of rage through me. Work through this? As if this were a simple misunderstanding rather than a deliberate, months-long deception, I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop again and began making lists, practical steps I needed to take. I had 3 days off before my next hospital shift. 3 days to begin disentangling my life from Ryan's, financial accounts to separate, belongings to retrieve, living arrangements to sort out. I approached it with the same methodical focus I applied to complex medical cases, breaking an overwhelming situation into manageable parts. As I worked, another realization hit me. A memory from 2 months ago when I'd noticed unusual charges on our joint credit card. Ryan had explained them as gifts for his mother's birthday. Now I wondered if they had actually been gifts for Megan. How much of my money had funded their affair? The more I examined our life together, the more questions arose. How many times had Ryan claimed to be working late when he was actually with Megan? How many of his guys' nights out had been covers for seeing her? How much of our relationship had been real, and how much had been performance? By morning, my shock had hardened into something colder and more focused. I hadn't just lost a boyfriend and a cousin, I had been systematically deceived by people I had trusted completely. And now I had to reckon not only with their betrayal, but with the narrative they were already spinning to justify it. As the first light of dawn broke through the hotel curtains, I made a decision. I would not be cast as the villain in their story. I would not allow my dedication to medicine to be used as an excuse for their betrayal. And I would not break, no matter how much it hurt. I picked up my phone and finally responded to my aunt's text. There's nothing to work through. Megan made her choice. Now she and you will have to live with the consequences. Then I called the one person I knew would help me navigate the painful practicalities ahead, my fellow resident and friend, Elena, who had gone through a messy divorce last year. I need your help, I said when she answered. I need to get my things from the apartment while Ryan's at work. I'll be there, she promised without hesitation. And Julia? For what it's worth, any man who couldn't see what he had with you is an idiot. I hung up and began to prepare myself for the day ahead. There would be time for healing later. Right now, I needed to focus on reclaiming what was mine, my possessions, my dignity, and my narrative. Elena arrived at the hotel at precisely 10 a.m. as promised, with coffee and a determined expression. Ryan's at work until 4, she confirmed. That gives us plenty of time. I nodded, grateful for her efficiency. In the harsh morning light, the reality of my situation felt even more surreal. Yesterday, I had been Dr. Julia Mitchell, pediatric resident with a long-term boyfriend and a close-knit family. Today, I was homeless, betrayed, and about to sort through the wreckage of my personal life. Before we go, Elena said, setting down her coffee, we should make a plan. What are your priorities? Essential documents, I replied immediately. Medical licenses, passport, birth certificate. Then clothes and personal items. Some of the furniture is mine, the desk and bookshelf my father built. But that can wait. Elena nodded, pulling out her phone. I've got my brother's truck for the bigger items. And I talked to Maria, she's got an extra room you can use for now. Maria was another resident, one with an actual house rather than an apartment. The offer of a real room instead of extended hotel stays was immediately tempting, though the thought of imposing made me hesitate. It's not charity, Elena said, reading my expression. It's what friends do. Now, do you have your key? I did. Despite everything, I hadn't surrendered my key to the apartment I had largely paid for. Small mercies. The drive to the apartment felt like entering hostile territory. I half expected to find Ryan there, or worse, Megan, despite Elena's assurances about Ryan's work schedule. The apartment building looked exactly the same as it had yesterday, which seemed wrong somehow. Shouldn't there be some outward sign that everything had changed? Inside, the apartment was unervingly normal. Breakfast dishes in the sink. Mail on the counter. The only indication of yesterday's confrontation was the stripped bed. Ryan had apparently changed the sheets. The thought made my stomach turn. Let's be methodical, Elena suggested, her calm presence anchoring me. Start with the essential documents, then move to personal items. I nodded and moved through the apartment with strange detachment, as if conducting an inventory rather than dismantling my life. In the home office, I collected my medical diplomas and certificates, carefully removing them from frames to save space. My research papers. The leather-bound journal my attending physician had given me after my first successful pediatric surgery. I end the bedroom. I packed my clothes efficiently, leaving behind anything Ryan had given me. I paused at the closet, noticing something odd. Several of my favorite dresses were missing. Looking for something? Elena asked, helping me fold a sweater. My blue wrap dress. And the black cocktail dress from that designer sample sale. They should be here. A sick feeling settled in my stomach as I realized the implications. I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram, searching through Megan's recent posts. There she was, 2 weeks ago, wearing my blue wrap dress at a work function. "New dress, new me," she had captioned it. "She's been wearing my clothes," I said, my voice distant to my own ears. "She's been here, in our apartment, going through my closet." Elena's expression hardened. "Pack everything," she advised. "We'll sort it out later. Let's just get you out of here." As we continued our methodical removal of my life, more discrepancies emerged. My favorite coffee mug was missing. A necklace my grandmother had given me was no longer in my jewelry box. The expensive face cream I saved for special occasions had been used up. It was as if Megan had been slowly erasing me, replacing me in my own home. Trying on my life like a costume, I was packing books from the living room shelves when I noticed the small wooden box on Ryan's desk. It contained mementos from our relationship, movie ticket stubs from our first date, a shell from our beach vacation, the key to our first apartment together. I hesitated, then left it untouched. Those memories no longer belonged to me. They had been tainted beyond reclamation. As Elena loaded the last of my clothes into her car, my phone rang. My aunt again. "Julia, please pick up. We need to discuss this as a family." I let it go to voicemail, then listened to her message. "Julia, I understand you're upset, but Megan is devastated. She made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But she's family. We need to find a way forward. Please call me back." The one-sided concern infuriated me. Megan was devastated by the consequences of her own actions, while no one seemed particularly concerned about my devastation at finding my boyfriend and cousin in my bed. My phone chimed again with a text from Ryan. "We need to talk about the apartment lease and bills. I can't afford this place on my own." Of course. Now that his deception had been exposed, Ryan was worried about practical matters, specifically, his financial situation without my income. I remembered with grim satisfaction that my name was on the lease as the primary tenant, my income having been necessary to secure the apartment. "Let him figure it out," Elena said, reading the text over my shoulder. "You don't owe him anything." We were doing a final sweep of the apartment when I noticed something on the coffee table, a prescription bottle with my cousin's name on it. The prescribing doctor was listed as Dr. Julia Mitchell. "Elena," I said slowly, picking up the bottle. "I didn't prescribe this." She took the bottle, examining it. "Sleeping pills. Fairly common, but I never wrote this prescription," I finished, a cold dread settling over me. Ryan must have called it in using my credentials. The implications were staggering. Prescription fraud could cost me my medical license, the career I had worked so hard to build. Had Ryan been so callous about my professional reputation? Or had he simply not thought about the consequences for me if this was discovered? "We need to document this," Elena said immediately, the seriousness of the situation clear to her as a fellow doctor. "Take photos. Keep the bottle. Then we need to talk to the hospital's legal department." This new betrayal cut even deeper than the affair. Ryan hadn't just risked my heart, he had risked my entire career. As we left the apartment, I took one final look around, at the space that had been home, at the life I had built so carefully and lost so suddenly. Then I closed the door firmly behind me, symbolic of the closure I was determined to find. I and Elena's car, my phone buzzed with notifications. Word had spread quickly through our social circle. Some messages were supportive, others were strangely neutral, as if my relationship's destruction was simply an unfortunate event rather than a deliberate act of betrayal. More disturbing were the messages from mutual friends who seemed to subtly blame me. "Relationships need nurturing, Jules. You've been so busy lately." And, "Ryan's been lonely for a long time." Not excusing what he did, but The narrative Ryan had constructed was already taking hold, that my dedication to medicine had somehow forced him into Megan's arms. That I had neglected the relationship. That I was partly to blame. People will believe what's convenient for them, Elena said as I showed her some of the messages. It's easier to think you share some blame than to accept that Ryan and Megan are simply selfish, dishonest people. She was right, of course. It was the same psychological mechanism I'd studied in medical school, people desperately wanting to believe the world was just, that bad things happened for a reason, that victims somehow deserved their fate. Because the alternative, that terrible things could happen to good people for no reason at all, was too frightening to contemplate. The truth will come out, Elena continued, pulling into Maria's driveway. And the people who matter will stand by you. I nodded, gathering my strength for the task ahead. Rebuilding my life from the ground up while maintaining my demanding medical career and navigating the social and familial fallout of Ryan and Megan's betrayal. I carried the first box of my possessions into Maria's spare room. My phone chimed with a final text from Ryan. I still love you, Julia. I hope someday you'll understand that none of this was personal. I stared at the message, the sheer audacity of it momentarily stunning me. Not personal? What could be more personal than betrayal with my own cousin? Then using my medical credentials without permission? Then systematically deceiving me for half a year? I blocked his number without responding, then did the same for Megan and my aunt. Whatever explanations or justifications they wanted to offer, I wasn't interested in hearing them. Not now, perhaps not ever. First step complete, Elena said, setting down a box of books. You're out. You're safe. Everything else can wait until tomorrow. She was right. I had survived the first day after the discovery. I had retrieved my essential possessions. I had a temporary place to stay. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. That night, in Maria's quiet spare bedroom, I allowed myself to really feel the pain I had been holding at bay with clinical detachment and practical tasks. The tears came again, but they were different now, not just for what I had lost, but for what I had never really had. A faithful partner. An honest relationship. A cousin I could trust. As I finally drifted toward sleep, Ryan's accusation echoed in my mind. You were never there for me. The irony was that I had always been there for him, supporting his career changes, his moods, his needs, while also pursuing the medical career that was my calling. What Ryan had really meant was, you were never there for me exclusively, prioritizing my needs above all else, including your own. And that, I realized with growing clarity, was something I would never apologize. 4.3 days after discovering Ryan and Megan's betrayal, I sat in Maria's guest room surrounded by folders, my laptop open to our joint bank account. My residency training had taught me to approach problems methodically, gather information, analyze patterns, develop a clear understanding before acting. Now I was applying those same skills to my personal life. This doesn't add up, I muttered, comparing our account statements with my own records. I'd been reviewing our finances for hours, and a disturbing pattern had emerged. Over the past 6 months, the exact timeline of the affair, Ryan's spending had increased dramatically. Expensive restaurant charges on nights I worked late shifts. Hotel bookings in the city where we lived. Jewelry store purchases that I'd never seen. My fingers trembled slightly as I clicked through to our credit card statement. There it was, a weekend getaway to a vineyard resort booked for next month, costing nearly $2,000. Under my name, but I'd never seen it before. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena. How's it going? Found something, I replied. Ryan's been using our joint account and my credit card to fund his affair. Her response was immediate. Document everything. I was already saving screenshots, downloading statements, creating a paper trail of financial betrayal. As a resident physician, my income was modest but steady. Ryan's work as a marketing consultant meant his earnings fluctuated. Our arrangement had always been that I covered the fixed expenses, rent, utilities, insurance, while he handled the variable costs and saved for our future. Now I wondered if those savings even existed. I logged into our investment account, which Ryan had set up and managed. The balance was shockingly low, less than a quarter of what it should have been based on our planned contributions. Withdrawals had been made regularly over the past year, always when I was working overnight shifts or at conferences. I leaned back, rubbing my eyes. The financial deception was even more extensive than I'd imagined. Ryan hadn't just cheated with my cousin, he'd been systematically using my income to finance their relationship while depleting our shared savings. My phone rang, the hospital administrator. My stomach clenched as I answered. "Dr. Mitchell, we need to discuss an irregularity with your prescribing records." Her voice was professionally neutral, but I heard the underlying concern. "This is about the prescription for Megan Carter," I said. "Yes, among others. Among others." My hand tightened on the phone. "I didn't write those prescriptions. My credentials were used without my knowledge or consent." A pause. "That's a serious accusation, Dr. Mitchell." "I know. I have evidence I'd like to share with the hospital's legal department." After arranging a meeting for the following day, I returned to my financial investigation with renewed urgency. This wasn't just about a relationship betrayal anymore. Ryan had potentially compromised my medical license, my entire career. I opened our shared cloud storage account, searching for any additional evidence. There, in a folder I rarely accessed, I found a document titled Weekend Plans. It contained detailed itineraries for trips with Megan, using my credit card points, staying at hotels where I had membership status from medical conferences. As I scrolled further, I found something that made my blood run cold. A folder of screenshots showing private conversations between Ryan and several of our mutual friends. In them, he portrayed me as cold, absent, career-obsessed. "Julia's never home," he wrote to one friend. "Sometimes I wonder if she even remembers she has a boyfriend." In another message to my friend Sarah, "I need someone who actually makes time for me. Julia's always at the hospital. I'm basically single most of the time anyway." The systematic campaign to rewrite our relationship history was there in black and white. Ryan hadn't just betrayed me. He'd been deliberately shaping a narrative where my dedication to medicine justified his infidelity. I continued digging and discovered emails between Ryan and Megan dating back 8 months. 2 months before my birthday party. They'd been flirting, planning, laying groundwork long before the actual affair began. "We need to be careful," Ryan had written. "Julia's schedule makes it easy, but we still need to be smart about this." Megan's reply made me physically ill. "She'll never suspect a thing. She trusts us both completely." They'd even discussed my work schedule, identifying patterns and opportunities. Screenshots of my hospital calendar, which I'd shared with Ryan so he could plan around my shifts, were exchanged, with dates highlighted as opportunities. The calculated nature of their betrayal was staggering. This wasn't a momentary lapse, a single mistake, or even an affair born of genuine feelings. It was a deliberate conspiracy conducted by 2 people who had spent years earning my trust. As the evidence mounted, another discovery stopped me cold. An email draft from Ryan to his friend Mike, dated just 2 weeks ago. "Once Julia finishes paying off the car next month, I think I'm done. Megan and I are ready to move forward, but I need to make sure the timing works financially." He had been planning to leave, but only after I'd finished paying off our car. The car that was in his name because my credit had been affected by my medical school loans when we'd purchased it. My phone buzzed with a notification from the bank. A large withdrawal had just been made from our joint account, $3,000, nearly everything that remained. Ryan must have realized I was investigating. I called the bank immediately, but the damage was done. Ryan had emptied the account, leaving only $50, just enough to avoid automatic closure for a zero balance. A calculated move, like everything else. A new text message appeared on my phone from an unknown number, but I recognized the name in the signature. Mike, Ryan's best friend. "Julia, I'm sorry about what happened. You should know Ryan's been saying things that aren't true. If you want to talk, I'm here." Mike and I had never been particularly close, but his message suggested a potential ally, someone else who had seen through Ryan's manipulations. I replied cautiously, "What kinds of things?" His response came quickly. "He's telling everyone you were cold and distant, that you two had basically separated already, that you knew about him and Megan and were fine with it." I know it's bullshit. So Ryan was already spinning the narrative, trying to control the story. I should have expected it, given everything else I'd discovered. When did he start talking about Megan? I asked Mike. Around New Year's. He made it sound like you two had an understanding. It never sat right with me, but New Year's. 8 months ago. The timeline kept extending backward, the deception deeper than I'd initially realized. Did you ever see them together at your place? I asked, remembering that Mike often hosted poker nights. A few times. She started showing up about 6 months ago. Ryan said you were too busy to come, but she was your stand-in or something. Looking back, it was weird. I thanked Mike for his honesty, then added him to my growing list of witnesses. The doctor in me was fully engaged now, gathering evidence, documenting symptoms, building a case. Not for a medical diagnosis, but for the systematic betrayal that had infected my life. BY evening, I had assembled a comprehensive file, financial records showing Ryan's misuse of our joint funds, evidence of his unauthorized use of my medical credentials, documentation of the premeditated nature of his affair with Megan, and statements from friends who had witnessed their deception. I sat back, exhausted but clear-eyed. The investigation had revealed a truth far more painful than what I'd initially discovered in our bedroom. Ryan and Megan hadn't just betrayed me impulsively. They had calculated, planned, and executed a months-long deception while systematically gaslighting me about my own relationship. Tomorrow I would meet with the hospital's legal department to protect my medical license. Then I would contact my bank to address the financial damage. After that, I would begin the process of untangling my life from Ryan's, legally, financially, and emotionally. You were never there for me, he had said, standing in our bedroom with my cousin. Now I understood the breathtaking projection of that statement. Ryan had never been there for me, not in any way that mattered. He had been undermining me, exploiting me, and betraying me while I worked to save children's lives. As I closed my laptop, a final text came through from Ryan. We need to talk about the financial situation. This doesn't have to get ugly. I stared at the message, noting the implicit threat behind his words. Too late, I thought. It was already ugly. He had made it that way. And now he would face the consequences of his actions, whether he was prepared for them or not. The hospital's legal conference room was intimidatingly formal, all polished oak and leather chairs. I sat across from Patricia Young, the hospital's chief legal counsel, and Michael Deerfield, the compliance officer for prescribing practices. Between us lay the folder containing evidence of the unauthorized prescriptions. To be clear, Dr. Mitchell, Patricia said, reviewing the documents, you're alleging that your boyfriend used your medical credentials without your knowledge to prescribe medications for your cousin and possibly others. Yes. I have the original bottle that I found in my apartment, and I've printed the prescribing records showing 7 other instances over the past year that I never authorized. Michael frowned, making notes. This is a serious breach of medical ethics and potentially criminal misuse of DA credentials. If what you're saying is true, it is, I interrupted, my voice steady. And I've brought evidence beyond the prescription records. I slid across printed copies of text exchanges I'd discovered on our shared iPad, messages between Ryan and Megan discussing getting prescriptions for her and her friends, joking about having a doctor in the family. Patricia's expression hardened as she reviewed them. This is concerning, Dr. Mitchell. But I must ask, how did you not notice these prescriptions being issued under your name? I had anticipated this question. As a pediatric resident, I write dozens of prescriptions daily. The system doesn't flag prescriptions for review unless there's a controlled substance involved, which these weren't. And Ryan knew my login information because he occasionally helped me with medical paperwork when I came home from 30-hour shifts. They exchanged glances, then Patricia nodded. We'll need to conduct a formal investigation, but given the evidence you've provided, I believe we can treat you as the victim rather than the responsible party here. Relief washed over me. My medical career, everything I'd worked for, wasn't in jeopardy. We'll also need to report this to the police, Michael added. Unauthorized use of medical credentials is a criminal offense. I had expected this, but still felt a twinge of something. Not regret, exactly. Maybe just recognition of how completely the bridges were being burned. I understand, I said. What do I need to do next? By the time I left the hospital 2 hours later, a plan was in place. The legal department would handle the reporting and investigation, with my cooperation as needed. My prescribing privileges would remain intact, though with additional monitoring for the next 6 months, a reasonable precaution that I readily accepted. My next stop was the bank. I'd made an appointment with their fraud department, armed with documentation of Ryan's pattern of financial exploitation. Unfortunately, Ms. Mitchell, both parties have legal access to joint accounts, the bank representative explained sympathetically. However, the credit card charges for items you didn't authorize, particularly those made after you discovered the infidelity, can be disputed. I nodded, having expected this. And going forward? We've frozen the joint account to prevent further withdrawals and removed Mr. Harrison as an authorized user on your personal credit card. The new card will arrive in 3 to 5 business days. It wasn't a complete solution, but it would stop the bleeding. The $3,000 Ryan had withdrawn was likely gone for good, but I could prevent him from taking anything more. That afternoon, I met with a lawyer Elena had recommended, Charlotte Weber, who specialized in complex personal and financial disentanglements. Not quite a divorce, but similar principles apply, Charlotte explained, reviewing my situation. You've been financially entangled with significant shared assets and liabilities. The good news is, you've done excellent work gathering evidence. What about the car? I asked. It's in his name, but I've made all the payments. Charlotte made notes. We can document the payment history from your accounts. Since you've nearly paid it off, we have options. We could demand reimbursement or negotiate a transfer of title. We spent the next 2 hours mapping out a comprehensive strategy. Charlotte would draft formal communications establishing my legal claims to various assets. We'd approach the landlord about removing Ryan from the lease since I was the primary tenant. We'd document my contributions to our shared property and investments. What about my cousin? I asked. She took some of my personal belongings, clothes, jewelry. Charlotte looked up from her notes. That's straightforward theft. We can include those items in our formal demands, with replacement values. By the time our meeting concluded, I had a clear roadmap for extricating my life from Ryan's, financially, legally, and practically. More importantly, I had reclaimed agency in a situation where I had initially felt powerless. My next task was perhaps the most challenging, crafting a strategic approach to the social and family dimensions of the betrayal. That evening, I invited Elena and Maria to help me map out this aspect of my response. Over takeout containers in Maria's kitchen, I explained my concerns. Ryan's already controlling the narrative, I said, making me out to be the cold, absent girlfriend who drove him to cheat. And my family seems more concerned with smoothing things over than holding Megan accountable. Elena nodded. Classic Darvo, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. He's making himself the victim of your career commitment rather than the perpetrator of betrayal. So what's the counter-strategy? Maria asked, practical as always. I pushed aside my half-eaten noodles. I need to be selective about who I engage with. Not everyone deserves an explanation. Together, we divided my social and family connections into categories: trusted allies who would receive the full story, casual acquaintances who would get basic facts without emotional detail, and those who had already demonstrated loyalty to Ryan or Megan, who would receive nothing from me. What about your aunt? Elena asked. She keeps calling you. I'd been wrestling with this question for days. My aunt had raised Megan as a single mother, and they had always been exceptionally close. I understood her instinct to protect her daughter, but her complete dismissal of my pain was another betrayal in itself. I'll meet with her, I decided. Once. Not to reconcile, but to make my position clear. After that, she can decide where her loyalties lie. Maria looked concerned. Are you sure that's wise? It might just give her another opportunity to pressure you into forgiving Megan. I'm not going alone, I clarified. I want both of you there. Their surprise shifted to understanding. This wasn't about reconciliation. It was about having witnesses to prevent later misrepresentation of what was said. With my professional, financial, and social strategies in place, there remained one final element. addressing Ryan and Megan directly. I knew confrontation was inevitable, but I was determined that it would happen on my terms, not theirs. They're going to want to explain, to justify, Elena warned. To make you understand their side. I don't need to understand their side, I said firmly. I need them to understand the consequences of their actions. We crafted careful rules of engagement. Any communication would be documented. I would never meet either of them alone. I would set firm boundaries about what I was and wasn't willing to discuss. And most importantly, I would remember that neither of them was entitled to my forgiveness, my understanding, or my emotional labor. The plan coming together gave me a sense of calm I hadn't felt since finding them in my bed. This wasn't about revenge. I had neither the time nor the energy for that, with my demanding medical career. This was about justice, about standing up for myself when others had failed to do so. That night, I received a text from Ryan. The landlord says you're trying to remove me from the lease. We need to talk about this. It's not fair. The irony of him suddenly caring about fairness wasn't lost on me. I drafted a response, then showed it to Elena and Maria for feedback before sending. All communication should go through my lawyer. Charlotte Weber, 555-7821. Your personal belongings will be packed and available for pickup on Saturday between 10 to 11 a.m. Elena and Maria will be present during the pickup. His response came quickly. Lawyers? Really, Julia? This is between us. I didn't reply. There was nothing more to say. What had once been between us had been shattered the moment he invited my cousin into our bed. Now it was between his actions and their consequences. The following morning, I woke to a barrage of texts from Megan, sent at 3 a.m., alternating between self-pity and accusation. You're ruining my life, she wrote. My mother is devastated. Everyone's talking about me. All over one mistake. One mistake. As if months of calculated deception could be reduced to a single moment of weakness. As if the premeditated betrayal by two people who claimed to love me was a simple error in judgment. I forwarded the messages to Charlotte without responding, then blocked Megan's number. That afternoon, I finalized my strategy with a step I'd been hesitating to take. I called my parents. Though we'd spoken briefly after the discovery, I hadn't shared the full extent of what I'd uncovered during my investigation. Mom, I said when she answered, I need to talk to you and Dad about something important. And I need you to really listen before responding. For the next hour, I laid out the truth, not just the infidelity, but the financial exploitation, the prescription fraud, the systematic campaign to undermine me. My mother gasped audibly when I described finding Ryan using my medical credentials to prescribe medications. Julia, my father said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger, why didn't you tell us all this sooner? I needed to understand it myself first, I explained. And I needed to have a plan in place. They listened as I outlined the steps I was taking: legal, financial, professional, and personal. By the time I finished, their initial shock had transformed into something else: fierce, protective support. What do you need from us? My mother asked. 2 things, I replied. First, I need you to understand that I won't be at any family gatherings where Megan is present. That's non-negotiable. Of course, my father agreed immediately. And second, I need you to tell Aunt Caroline that she needs to stop calling me about working things out as a family. There's nothing to work out. Megan made her choice. My parents promised their unconditional support, a promise that meant more than they could know. With them firmly in my corner, the strategy was complete. I had protected my career, secured my finances, established legal boundaries, cultivated a support network, and clarified exactly where I stood. Now it was time to implement the plan. Ryan and Megan had spent months orchestrating their betrayal. They were about to discover that I had spent the past week orchestrating something of my own, a structured, systematic response that would leave no doubt about the consequences of their actions. As I ended the call with my parents, I felt something shift inside me, a quiet strength replacing the initial shock and pain. They had underestimated me, assuming that my dedication to medicine meant I lacked the capacity or will to defend myself against their betrayal. They were about to learn how wrong they had been. The morning of Ryan's scheduled pickup arrived with an unexpected sense of calm. Over the past week, I had methodically implemented each element of my plan, positioning myself for this confrontation from a place of strength rather than victimhood. Elena and Maria bustled around the apartment we had temporarily rented, arranging Ryan's boxed belongings in the living room. Everything had been meticulously inventoried: clothes, electronics, personal items, with photographs documenting the contents of each box. "He's going to try to engage you emotionally," Elena warned, checking her watch. "Remember the plan?" I nodded, reviewing my mental boundaries. No private conversations. No debates about who was at fault. No discussions about our relationship. This was a property exchange, nothing more. At precisely 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Ryan standing alone, though he'd texted earlier asking to bring Megan to help carry things. I had firmly declined. Maria opened the door while I remained in the kitchen, deliberately creating distance from the initial interaction. "Julia?" Ryan called, stepping into the apartment. "Can we talk for a minute?" "Alone?" Elena intercepted him. "That's not happening. Your things are boxed and inventoried. You have 1 hour to verify and remove them." His expression darkened. "This is between me and Julia. You don't need to be involved." "Actually, we do," Maria replied calmly. "As witnesses." Ryan's eyes found me in the kitchen. "Julia, this is ridiculous. We were together for 4 years. We can't end things like this." I approached, maintaining professional distance. "You ended things when you chose to betray me. Repeatedly and deliberately. That's not fair." "You were never home. Your belongings are in those boxes," I interrupted, my voice level. "You have 55 minutes remaining." For a moment, something like shock registered on his face. He'd expected tears, recriminations, emotional vulnerability, the Julia he thought he knew. Instead, he was facing a woman who had replaced pain with precision, hurt with clarity. "Fine," he muttered, turning to the boxes. "Where's the rest of it?" "That's everything that belongs solely to you," Elena explained, handing him the inventory list. "Joint purchases remain with Julia, as she paid for the majority of our shared assets." His face flushed. "That's not, it's fully documented," I interrupted, indicating the financial records on the counter. "Your unauthorized withdrawals from our joint account have been noted as well. My lawyer will be in touch about restitution." Ryan's composure cracked further. "Restitution? Are you serious?" "Look, I know you're upset about Megan, but this is going too far." "This isn't about Megan," I corrected. "This is about financial misconduct, prescription fraud, and property theft. The affair is actually the least of your legal concerns at this point." The color drained from his face. "Prescription fraud? What are you talking about?" I handed him a copy of the hospital's investigation report, with personal details redacted. "Using my medical credentials to prescribe medications is a felony, Ryan. The hospital has already reported it to the authorities." He stared at the document, genuine fear replacing his previous confidence. "I didn't. It wasn't like that. Megan just needed something for anxiety, and you thought my medical license was a convenience for you to exploit," I finished. "Just like you thought our joint finances were yours to misappropriate for your affair. Just like you thought my cousin's clothes and jewelry were acceptable gifts." Ryan set down the document, his hands visibly shaking. For the first time, he seemed to truly grasp the seriousness of his actions beyond the emotional betrayal. "Julia," he tried again, his voice lower. "I made mistakes. Serious ones. But 4 years together has to count for something. We can work through this." I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing but a distant sadness for the man I had thought he was. "Our relationship ended the moment you decided to betray my trust," I said simply. "But your legal and financial obligations remain. Charlotte will contact your lawyer with the full accounting." For the next 40 minutes, Ryan silently packed his belongings into his car, the swagger and self-righteousness replaced by grim realization. As he loaded the final box, he turned to make one last attempt. "I did love you," he said. "I know you don't believe that now, but it's true." "That's the thing about love," I replied. "It's demonstrated through actions, not words. Your actions showed exactly what you thought of me." After he left, The three of us sat in silence for a moment, the tension of the confrontation slowly dissipating. "You did it," Elena said finally. "Exactly according to plan." I nodded, a strange lightness replacing the knot that had lived in my chest for days. This wasn't closure. That would come with time, but it was a reclamation of power that Ryan and Megan had tried to take from me. That afternoon, I received the expected text from my aunt. "Ryan told me what happened today. This vendetta isn't healthy, Julia. We need to talk." I showed Elena and Maria, who had stayed to support me through this next phase. "Right on schedule. Are you sure you want to meet her?" Maria asked. "You could just send a message." "I'm sure," I replied. "Some things need to be said face to face." We arranged to meet my aunt at a cafe the following day, neutral territory where we could leave if necessary. When we arrived, I was surprised to see she'd come alone. I'd half expected her to bring Megan in an ambush attempt at reconciliation. "Julia," she began as soon as we sat down, "this has gone far enough. Ryan says you're making legal threats, talking about pressing charges. This is family." Yes, I agreed. Megan is family, which made her betrayal all the more significant. My aunt sighed dramatically. "People make mistakes. Megan is devastated. She's lost friends, her reputation. She lost those things through her own actions," I interrupted. "Just as she lost my trust and any place in my life." "You can't just cut off family," she insisted. "Actually, I can. And I have." I maintained eye contact, my voice steady. "This isn't a negotiation, Aunt Caroline. I'm not here to discuss reconciliation. I'm here to make my position absolutely clear. Megan is no longer welcome in my life. Any family event she attends, I will not." My aunt's expression hardened. "So you're forcing everyone to choose between you?" "No. I'm choosing myself, for once. Everyone else is free to make their own decisions." Elena and Maria remained silent witnesses, their presence preventing the conversation from being reframed later. "What about forgiveness?" my aunt tried. "Doesn't your faith teach forgiveness is my choice to make on my own timeline?" I cut in. "It's not something Megan is entitled to demand, nor something you can negotiate on her behalf." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, my aunt cycling through guilt, manipulation, and appeals to family loyalty. Through it all, I maintained my boundaries with calm precision, neither raised my voice nor allowed myself to be diverted from my central message. This was not a temporary rift to be repaired, but a permanent realignment of my life without Megan and it. As we prepared to leave, my aunt made one final attempt. "Megan told me what Ryan said to you, that you were never there for him. Maybe there's some truth to that, Julia. Your career has always come first." I paused, then sat back down, folding my hands on the table. "Let me be clear about something, Aunt Caroline. My career as a pediatrician means I save children's lives. I help families through their darkest moments. I provide care to those who need it most. That work will always be important to me." I leaned forward slightly. "Ryan didn't cheat because I worked long hours. He cheated because he's selfish and entitled. Megan didn't betray me because I wasn't around enough. She betrayed me because she coveted what I had and put her desires above our family bond." My aunt blinked, taken aback by my directness. "The problem was never that I wasn't there enough," I continued. "The problem was that Ryan and Megan felt entitled to my time, my attention, my resources, and my trust without being worthy of any of them." I stood, gathering my purse. "I have a shift at the hospital in an hour. Children who need my help. That's where I'll be, exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing exactly what I'm meant to do." As we left the cafe, Elena squeezed my arm. Perfectly executed. Over the next few days, my strategy continued to unfold with precision. The hospital's investigation formally cleared me of wrongdoing and placed a note in my file documenting the unauthorized use of my credentials. The bank froze the remaining joint account and began the process of disputing fraudulent charges on my credit card. Charlotte sent formal documentation to Ryan's hastily acquired lawyer, outlining the financial reconciliation required. The social fallout developed as expected. Some mutual friends chose sides, most gravitating toward whoever they'd been closer to originally. Others attempted to remain neutral, though I made it clear that there was no neutral position on deception and betrayal. A few surprised me by reaching out with unequivocal support, including people I hadn't expected to stand with me. A week after Ryan's property pickup, I received an email from Megan, the only channel she had left after I'd blocked her on all other platforms. The subject line read simply, "I'm sorry." I read it once, noting the familiar pattern of self-justification beneath the superficial apology. "I never meant to hurt you. It just happened. We couldn't help our feelings. I hope someday you can understand." There was nothing to understand that I didn't already know. I forwarded the email to Charlotte for documentation purposes, then archived it without responding. That evening, as I prepared for my hospital shift, I received a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Julia." Ryan's voice was urgent. "Don't hang up. I just got a letter from the police about the prescription thing. This is serious. You have to tell them it was a misunderstanding." "It wasn't a misunderstanding," I replied calmly. "It was fraud. You know I didn't mean it that way. It was just convenient. Megan needed something for anxiety, and you're a doctor. People do this all the time." "No, Ryan, they don't. Because it's illegal and unethical. It threatens patients and medical licenses." His voice took on a desperate edge. "Julia, please. This could ruin my life. I could lose my job, have a criminal record. You should have thought of that before using my credentials without permission." "I made a mistake," he exploded. "One mistake. And you're trying to destroy me for it." I took a deep breath, maintaining my composure. It wasn't one mistake. It was a pattern of deliberate choices: to betray my trust, to exploit my finances, to use my professional credentials illegally, to gaslight me about our relationship. Silence stretched between us. "You told me I was never there for you," I continued, my voice steady. "But the truth is, you were never worthy of my presence. You took everything I gave and demanded more, then blamed me when your own selfishness became too obvious to ignore." I could hear his breathing on the other end of the line, but he offered no response. "I have to go now. I have children who need me." I ended the call and blocked his number, then finished preparing for my shift. As I drove to the hospital, I realized something had shifted inside me. The pain was still there, but it no longer defined me. In its place was something stronger, a clearer understanding of my own worth, independent of anyone else's validation. Ryan had accused me of never being there for him. In executing my strategy with such precision, I had proven that I was fully capable of being present and focused when it mattered, even if what mattered now was protecting myself from the very person who had made that accusation. As I walked through the hospital doors, I felt a sense of alignment I hadn't experienced in months. This was who I was, Dr. Julia Mitchell, pediatric resident, a woman of competence and compassion who would no longer apologize for the space she occupied in the world. The betrayal had been devastating, but my response to it had revealed strengths I hadn't known I possessed. And that, perhaps, was the most unexpected outcome of all. 3 months after discovering Ryan and Megan's betrayal, I stood outside the upscale restaurant where the family meeting had been arranged. My aunt had orchestrated this gathering, positioning it as a necessary step toward healing. What she hadn't anticipated was that I would arrive fully prepared. "You don't have to do this," Elena reminded me, standing beside me on the sidewalk. "We can still leave." I straightened my shoulders, smoothing down the midnight blue dress I'd chosen deliberately, professional, polished, powerful. "I need to do this. Once, then never again." Inside, they were already waiting, Ryan and Megan seated side by side, my aunt across from them, 3 empty chairs clearly meant for me and whomever I might bring. I'd brought both Elena and Charlotte, my lawyer, a choice that visibly surprised them. "Julia," my aunt began, rising to embrace me. I accepted the hug stiffly, then introduced my companions. "A lawyer." Megan's voice cracked slightly. "This is supposed to be a family conversation." "Which is exactly why I brought representation," I replied calmly, taking my seat. "To ensure it remains a conversation, not a manipulation." Ryan's eyes darted nervously between me and Charlotte. He looked diminished somehow, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something more haunted. The police investigation into the prescription fraud had clearly taken its toll. We're here because this situation has affected all of us, my aunt began carefully. And it's time to find a path forward. I set my portfolio on the table. I agree. Which is why I've prepared a comprehensive overview of exactly what that path looks like from my perspective. Megan's face paled as I methodically laid out documents, financial statements, legal notices, the hospital's investigation findings. A concrete record of their betrayal and its consequences. Julia, Ryan interrupted, leaning forward. I know I hurt you. We both did. But this turning it into some kind of legal battle, it doesn't have to be this way. Actually, it does, I countered evenly. You transformed our relationship into a transaction when you decided to exploit me financially while betraying me emotionally. I'm simply concluding the business aspect. My aunt shifted uncomfortably. This feels unnecessarily hostile. We're trying to heal wounds, not create new ones. Interesting, I noted, turning to her. When Ryan and Megan betrayed me, you called it a mistake. When I respond by protecting myself legally and financially, suddenly I'm being hostile. Megan's eyes filled with tears, the same performance she'd perfected since childhood. I never wanted this to happen. It just evolved. We didn't plan to hurt you. Actually, you did, I said, sliding forward printouts of their conversations. You literally scheduled your affair around my hospital shifts. You used my credit card to book your getaways. You took my clothes from my closet. The evidence lay between us, incontrovertible and damning. Ryan stared at the documents, then finally raised his eyes to meet mine. If you had been there for me, none of this would have happened, he said, a last desperate attempt to shift blame. The restaurant around us seemed to fade as I leaned forward, my voice low but crystal clear. I was always there for you, Ryan. I supported your career changes, covered our expenses when you couldn't, scheduled my residency around your preferences, and still made time for your family events. What you actually mean is that I wasn't exclusively devoted to your needs above everything else, including my calling to save children's lives. I turned to Megan. And you. You weren't just my cousin. You were the sister I never had. I trusted you completely. And you used that trust to take what wasn't yours, not because you loved Ryan, but because you wanted what I had. The silence that followed was weighted with truth. My aunt's eyes darted between us, her carefully orchestrated reconciliation crumbling. The financial separation is nearly complete, Charlotte stated professionally, breaking the tension. The outstanding matter of the prescription fraud remains with the authorities. Beyond that, my client has no interest in further engagement. So that's it? Megan whispered. You're just cutting us out of your life forever? I gathered my documents, tucking them back into my portfolio. That decision was made the moment you chose to betray me. I'm simply formalizing it. As I stood to leave, Ryan made one final attempt. I did love you, Julia. In my way. I paused, looking at him with clarity that had taken months to achieve. Your way wasn't love, Ryan. It was entitlement. And I deserve better. Walking away from that table felt like shedding the final weight of their betrayal. Behind me, I could hear my aunt's distressed voice, Megan's quiet sobbing, but they no longer had the power to pull me back. I had said what needed saying, established the boundaries that would protect me going forward. Outside in the evening air, Elena squeezed my arm. You did it perfectly. Not perfectly, I corrected her, breathing deeply. But completely. The confrontation hadn't brought the closure fairy tales promise, but it had demonstrated, to them and to myself, that I would no longer accept the narrative they'd tried to write for me. My story would continue on my terms, without them. 1 year after the day that shattered my world, I stood in the entrance of my new apartment, cardboard boxes stacked neatly against freshly painted walls. Sunlight streamed through uncovered windows, illuminating possibilities rather than painful memories. Last box, Elena announced triumphantly, setting down a container marked kitchen with exaggerated care. I think we've officially completed your transition to the next chapter. I smiled, surveying the space that was entirely mine, chosen without compromise, furnished according to my preferences, located conveniently between the hospital and the park where I enjoyed morning runs. No trace remained of the life I had shared with Ryan, no artifacts of the future we had planned together. How does it feel? Maria asked, collapsing onto my new sofa. Different, I admitted. But good different. The past year had unfolded with unexpected clarity once I'd moved beyond the initial shock. My residency had progressed smoothly, my focus on medicine providing both purpose and perspective. The financial disentanglement from Ryan had concluded largely in my favor, though I'd chosen not to pursue further legal action once the essential separations were complete. The prescription fraud case had resulted in probation rather than jail time, a consequence that balanced justice with mercy. I hadn't attended the hearing, having said everything I needed to say months earlier. My phone buzzed with a reminder: dinner with my parents tonight. Our relationship had strengthened through the crisis, their unwavering support helping restore my faith in family even as other branches of our tree had been necessarily pruned. "You know what this calls for," Elena declared, producing a bottle of champagne from her bag. "A proper housewarming." As we settled into conversation, the doorbell rang, an unexpected interruption to our small celebration. I opened the door to find Mike, Ryan's former best friend, standing awkwardly in the hallway. "Hey," he said, looking uncertain. "I heard you were moving in today." I was in the neighborhood and thought. He held up a small plant in a ceramic pot. "Housewarming tradition, right?" I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. Our friendship had been an unexpected development, one of the few positive outcomes of the past year. After providing his honest account of Ryan and Megan's behavior, Mike had maintained occasional contact, our shared history creating a unique understanding. "Ryan's leaving town," he announced without preamble once inside. "Taking a job in Seattle. Megan's not going with him." I absorbed this information with surprising neutrality. "I see. He wanted me to tell you," Mike continued, setting down the plant. "Said he thought you should know." "Why?" Mike shrugged. "Closure, maybe? Or just his way of admitting defeat." The news sat between us, significant yet oddly distant. A year ago, it would have consumed me. Now it was merely information about people who no longer shaped my narrative. "I ran into him last week," Mike added, accepting the champagne Elena offered. "He's different. Humbled, I guess. Said something about finally understanding what you meant at that restaurant." I nodded, recalling my words about entitlement versus love. Some lessons are expensive. Our conversation shifted to other topics: Mike's new relationship, Elena's research project, my recent promotion at the hospital. Ryan and Megan faded to the background where they now belonged, supporting characters in a story that had moved beyond them. Later that evening, as I prepared to meet my parents, I paused before the mirror. The woman reflected there was recognizably me, yet undeniably changed, stronger around the eyes, more deliberate in her movements, less apologetic in her presence. The betrayal had forced a reckoning not just with Ryan and Megan, but with my own patterns and priorities. I had emerged with clearer boundaries, deeper friendships, and a renewed appreciation for my work. The pain had been transformative, revealing strengths I might never have discovered otherwise. At dinner, my father raised his glass in a toast. "To Julia, the strongest person I know." My mother reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "We're so proud of you. Not just for your career accomplishments, but for how you've handled everything this year." I smiled, genuinely moved by their support. I had good examples. As we talked and laughed through the meal, I realized how completely my life had recalibrated. The emptiness that had threatened to consume me 1 year ago had been filled with meaning created entirely on my terms: professional satisfaction, authentic relationships, hard-earned wisdom. Walking home later, I took a detour through the park where I sometimes encountered patients' families. The evening was cool, stars emerging above the city skyline, life continuing its steady rhythm around me. My phone buzzed with a final text from Ryan: "I'm leaving town tomorrow." I know it's too late for apologies, but I want you to know you were right. About everything. Especially when you said I was never worthy of your presence. I see that now. I read it once, then deleted it without responding. His recognition of the truth did not require my acknowledgement. His journey toward understanding belonged to him alone, just as my journey toward renewal belonged to me. Entering my new apartment, I moved through rooms still unfamiliar, yet already infused with possibility. The plant Mike had brought sat on my windowsill, small but resilient, an apt metaphor for the life I was cultivating. Ryan's accusation had once cut deeply. You were never there for me. Now I understood its profound inaccuracy. I had always been fully present, in my relationships, in my work, in my commitments. What Ryan had really meant was that I had refused to diminish myself to inflate his importance. As I settled into my new home, I felt gratitude for that refusal. It had cost me a relationship built on false expectations, but it had preserved the essence of who I was meant to be. The betrayal had been real. The pain had been necessary. But the renewal, that was the true gift, unexpected and entirely mine.